There are houses in America right now sitting completely empty, with working roofs, real foundations, and actual addresses. And the cities that own them are so desperate to get rid of them that they will literally hand them to you for $1. One single dollar. Not a typo, not a scam, not one of those catch situations where you find out later the house is actually a refrigerator with windows. We're talking about real programs run by real city governments in real American cities that have been quietly giving away homes for years. And the overwhelming majority of Americans have absolutely no idea this is happening. Now, before you grab your wallet and start Googling free house, hold on, because there are 3 things you need to know before this video is over. First, the cities doing this are not the ones you'd expect. Second, the requirements to qualify are surprisingly simple. And third, and this is the part that's going to genuinely shock you, some of these programs have been running since the 1970s, and the government has done almost nothing to advertise them. Almost like they don't want you to find out. So today we're going inside the actual programs, the actual cities, and the actual catches. Because yes, there are catches and some of them are wild. We're going to cover 6 places where this is happening right now, rank them from interesting experiment to I am actually moving tomorrow. And by the end of this video, you're going to have more actionable information about buying cheap property in America than most real estate agents will ever tell you. Stay until the end, because the last one on this list is the one nobody is talking about, and it might be the most legitimately insane real estate opportunity in the entire country right now. Let's go. So how did we get here? How did America end up with entire cities full of empty houses they're practically begging people to take? The short version, deindustrialization happened, people left, and the houses stayed. The long version is a little more heartbreaking. For most of the 20th century, American cities were built around one thing: industry. Steel mills, auto plants, coal mines, rubber factories. And when those industries collapsed, and they collapsed hard starting in the 1970s and accelerating through the 80s and 90s, the workers didn't stick around to watch. They left. Their kids left. Their kids' never moved back. And the houses just sat there. Now here's where it gets genuinely bizarre. When a homeowner abandons a property and stops paying taxes, the city eventually takes ownership. That's standard. What's not standard is what happens when a city ends up owning thousands of those properties simultaneously. Because maintaining thousands of empty houses costs money, demolishing them costs money, and leaving them to rot costs the city in declining property values, increased crime, and the general vibe of a place that has given up on itself. So some cities, the clever ones, or maybe just the desperate ones, came up with a different solution: give them away. And that is exactly what they did. Gary, Indiana, population, shrinking faster than your phone battery at 3%. You can buy a house in Gary, Indiana right now for less than a decent pair of headphones. We're talking properties listed at $1, some at $500, some at prices so low your brain genuinely refuses to process them as real numbers. Gary was once one of the most important industrial cities in America. U.S. Steel built the entire city from scratch in 1906, named it after Elbert Gary, the company's chairman, and for decades it was an economic powerhouse. At its peak in 1960, Gary had over 178,000 residents. It had hotels, theaters, department stores. It had a whole functioning identity. Then the steel industry collapsed, and Gary did not handle it well. Today, Gary has somewhere around 70,000 people, depending on which census you believe and how optimistic you're feeling. That means the city lost more than half its population in about 40 years, and all those people who left, they left their houses behind, thousands of them just abandoned, doors open, furniture inside, like everyone just got up one morning, agreed not to talk about it, and drove away. Now imagine this. You're driving through Gary on a Tuesday afternoon. The streets are wide, built for a population twice the current size. The light is doing this thing where it comes through broken windows in abandoned buildings and makes everything look simultaneously beautiful and incredibly sad. There's a church on the corner that hasn't had a congregation in 15 years, but the stained glass is still perfect. There's a house 2 blocks over with a porch swing still attached, gently moving in the wind, and nobody has sat in it since 2003. That's scary. It is genuinely one of the most surreal places in America, and it has a $1 home program. The city's community development office has been working through its inventory of tax foreclosed properties for years now, selling them to buyers willing to commit to renovation. The price? Sometimes literally $1. The catch? You have to agree to bring the property up to code within a certain time frame, usually somewhere between 6 months and 2 years depending on the program cycle. Here's what nobody tells you though. Renovation costs in Gary can run anywhere from $30,000 to $150,000 depending on the property's condition. So yes, you bought the house for $1. You are absolutely going to spend significantly more than $1 making it livable. But here's the thing, even with $80,000 in renovations, you're all in on a house in a city adjacent to Chicago for less than $100,000. In a housing market where the national median home price is sitting above $400,000, that math is not nothing. The Wi-Fi situation in some of these neighborhoods still thinks it's 2009. The nearest grocery store might require a 15-minute drive. And Gary's crime statistics are, let's be honest, not the kind of numbers that make you feel great about leaving your car unlocked. But would you do it for $1? That question is going to stay on the table, because it gets more interesting from here. Detroit, Michigan, the city that became a legend for all the wrong reasons. If Gary is America's cautionary tale, Detroit is America's cautionary tale with better architecture and a more dramatic soundtrack. At its peak, Detroit had 1.8 million people. Today it has somewhere around 620,000, a population collapse so severe that the city filed for the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history in 2013. At the time, Detroit owned approximately 78,000 vacant and abandoned properties. 78,000. That is not a typo either. That is an entire mid-sized city's worth of empty buildings just sitting inside another city. The Detroit Land Bank Authority, which is the organization managing all these properties, has been running several programs simultaneously to deal with this inventory. And some of them are extraordinary. The auction program lists properties starting at $1,000. The Own It Now program offers properties at set prices, sometimes as low as $1,000. And then there's the Side Lot program, where neighboring residents can literally buy the empty lot next to their house for $100, just to have more yard space or make sure nobody builds something terrible next door. $100 for land in a major American city. Let that sit for a second. Now here's the part where reality shows up, because Detroit's story has layers. The city has genuinely been making a comeback in certain neighborhoods. Midtown, Corktown, Eastern Market, the areas close to downtown have seen real investment, real restaurants, real people moving in and fixing things up. If you buy smart in Detroit, you could be sitting on significant equity in 10 years as the city continues its slow but real revival. But if you buy in the wrong neighborhood, you might be the only person on your block. Literally. There are streets in Detroit where 1 or 2 houses are occupied and everything else on the block is either vacant, boarded up, or just gone, demolished, and turned back into grass. It creates this genuinely uncanny effect where suburban-style empty lots appear randomly inside what used to be dense urban neighborhoods. Imagine this. You're standing on your new front porch in Detroit on a Saturday morning in October. The air smells like Lake Erie is thinking about winter. 3 houses down, a guy is fixing up a Victorian that's been empty since the Reagan administration. Across the street, there's a community garden where a house used to be, run by a woman who's been in the neighborhood for 40 years and has opinions about everything. The bones of the city are extraordinary, the craftsmanship in these old homes, the woodwork, the original hardwood floors, because Detroit was building houses when building meant something. It is, genuinely, one of the most interesting urban experiments happening in America right now. The potholes on certain streets have achieved legendary status. The water system has had well-documented problems, and winter in Detroit is not a season, it's more of a personality. But for the right kind of person, this is a real opportunity, and Detroit is just the beginning of what we're talking about today. Because the next city on this list, people actually don't know it exists. Youngstown, Ohio, the city that decided to get smaller on purpose. Most cities, when they start shrinking, panic. They chase new industries, offer corporate tax incentives, build sports stadiums nobody asked for, rename themselves things like Innovation Hub, and hope for the best. Youngstown, Ohio did something completely different. Youngstown looked at its declining population, looked at its thousands of vacant properties and said, and I'm paraphrasing here, what if we just leaned into it? The Youngstown 2010 plan, adopted in 2005, was the first major American city plan to officially embrace shrinkage as a strategy. Instead of trying to fill empty neighborhoods with new development, they started demolishing vacant buildings, turning the land green, and reimagining what a smaller, denser, more functional city could look like. It was radical, it was controversial, and it created one of the most interesting property markets in the country. The Manning County Land Bank manages thousands of properties in and around Youngstown. Purchase prices for residential properties can start at a few $100s, some go for less. The requirements generally involve a renovation commitment and owner occupancy, meaning you have to actually live there, you can't just flip it and disappear. Youngstown at its peak had 170,000 people. Today it's around 60,000. The city has demolished over 8,000 structures since the early 2000s. What's left is a strange, honest, oddly compelling city that has stopped pretending to be something it's not. Here's what nobody tells you about Youngstown. The food scene is legitimate. The arts community is punching way above its weight. And because so many of the people who stayed made a conscious decision to stay, they're not there by accident, they're there by choice. There's a genuinely tight community feel that you don't find in places that are just coasting. The catch: Youngstown's poverty rate is severe. The economic opportunity is limited. If you're relocating for a job, you better have a remote one or be willing to commute to Cleveland or Pittsburgh. And the winters in Northeast Ohio are the kind of winters that make you question your fundamental life choices somewhere around February. Imagine this. It's a Sunday afternoon in Youngstown. Middle of June, you're sitting on the porch of your house, which you bought for $600 and spent 18 months renovating yourself. Your neighbor from across the street walks over with 2 beers because that's just what people do here. Down the block, where 3 houses used to be, there's now a small green space where kids are playing. The street is quiet in a way that no street in any expensive city is ever quiet anymore. And your mortgage payment is literally 0. Would you trade the city life for this? Could you handle the trade-off? Keep that question in mind, because we're about to get into a program so specific and so underreported that it almost feels like a secret. Baltimore, Maryland, a city hiding in plain sight. Here's the thing about Baltimore, it's not some forgotten Rust Belt ghost town. It's a major American city. It's 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. It has Johns Hopkins. It has the Inner Harbor. It has a very intense relationship with its own identity that residents will describe to you in great detail if you give them the slightest opening. And Baltimore has been quietly selling houses for $1 for decades. The Vacants to Value program is Baltimore's main vehicle for this, but the city has run various versions of $1 home programs going all the way back to the 1970s. The concept is always the same. City takes ownership of abandoned property through tax foreclosure. City sells it cheap to someone willing to fix it up. City gets a tax-paying resident instead of a money-draining vacant lot. What makes Baltimore different from Gary or Youngstown is density and location. Baltimore's vacant housing is embedded inside a functioning major metro area. You are not moving to isolation. You are moving to a city with real transit, real hospitals, real universities, real restaurants. You're just doing it at a price point that would be impossible virtually anywhere else on the East Coast. The neighborhoods where these properties are available are, in many cases, surrounded by blocks that are fully occupied and functioning. The urban fabric is still there. The infrastructure is still there. You're not pioneering into the wilderness, you're renovating a row house on a street that has a coffee shop on the corner. But here's what nobody tells you. Baltimore's crime statistics are serious. Depending on the year, Baltimore ranks among the highest homicide rates per capita of any major American city. This is not a small footnote, it's the central fact that any honest conversation about Baltimore real estate has to include. And yet, the people buying and renovating in Baltimore's challenged neighborhoods are making calculated bets. And some of them are paying off. Neighborhoods that were written off 15 years ago are showing signs of real change. Property values in transitional Baltimore neighborhoods have in some cases tripled in the past decade. The porch culture in Baltimore is genuinely wonderful. The crab situation is legitimately life-changing. The accent will take you a few weeks to fully decode. But the opportunity is real in a way that feels almost unfair. You can be 45 minutes from the nation's capital in a house you bought for $1. That sentence should not be possible. And yet here we are. Flint, Michigan, the city that made national news for all the wrong reasons and is now trying something remarkable. You know Flint, everyone knows Flint for reasons that are genuinely painful and genuinely important. The water crisis, the governmental failures, the years of neglect that made what was already a struggling city into a national symbol of institutional failure. What you probably don't know is what's happening in Flint right now. The Genesee County Land Bank is one of the most active and sophisticated land banks in the entire country. They have been managing Flint's vacant property inventory for years, and their approach has evolved into something genuinely impressive. Low-cost property sales, renovation loans, first-time homebuyer programs, strategic demolition, and community garden initiatives. And here's the thing about Flint's property prices even outside the land bank program, they are staggering. You can find move-in ready homes in Flint on the regular market for $30,000 to $50,000, not land bank properties, regular listings, houses with roofs and floors and kitchens. The water infrastructure has been substantially replaced following the crisis. New pipes. Billions of dollars of federal investment flowing into the city's systems. The physical crisis that defined Flint's reputation for a decade has been addressed at a level that most people who formed their opinion of Flint in 2016 simply aren't aware of. Does Flint have significant problems? Absolutely. Economic opportunity is severely limited. The population has declined from 200,000 in its peak to around 80,000 today. The city carries a psychological weight from what happened that affects how people feel about living there. But imagine this. You're in a fully renovated 1920s craftsman bungalow in Flint, original hardwood floors, big front porch, a yard that would cost you $3,000 a month to live next to in any major metro area, and you own it outright, because you got it from the land bank for $2,000 and put $60,000 into the renovation. Your total investment is $62,000 and you own a house. The Wi-Fi works now, by the way, they upgraded. Would you move to Flint? I want to know, actually, drop it in the comments right now. Yes or no, because what we've covered so far is genuinely interesting. But I have saved the absolute best, or maybe the most insane, depending on your definition, for last. This final city is doing something so dramatically different from anything else on this list that it deserves its own category. And when I tell you where it is, you're going to be surprised. Because it is not where you expect. New Haven, Connecticut. An Ivy League city giving away houses and nobody is talking about it. Stop, I know what you're thinking. Connecticut, New Haven, home of Yale University, one of the most expensive states in the country. Yes, that one. Here's what happened. New Haven, like many northeastern cities, has a significant inventory of tax-foreclosed properties. Unlike Gary or Flint, New Haven is surrounded by one of the wealthiest regions in the entire country. The cost of living in the suburbs around New Haven is brutal. But inside certain New Haven neighborhoods, the city has been running programs to sell vacant properties at dramatically reduced prices, sometimes as low as $1, to buyers willing to rehabilitate them. And the location math here is genuinely extraordinary. New Haven is 2 hours from New York City by train. It has world-class hospitals. Yale New Haven is a major medical center. It has a legitimate food scene, a real arts community, and the kind of urban density that people who have moved away from cities actually miss. It has a university with 14,000 students creating economic activity year-round. The neighborhoods where these properties are available have challenges. New Haven has persistent poverty in certain areas and crime statistics that don't match the Ivy League branding. The city is a genuinely complicated place, with extreme wealth and extreme poverty existing in unusual proximity. But here is the thing. People are buying properties in New Haven's challenged neighborhoods, renovating them, and watching their property values grow in ways that make the investment math look spectacular. Because they're embedded in a metro area with tremendous underlying economic strength. Imagine this, you're on the green in New Haven on a Saturday morning in April. The dogwood trees are doing their thing, there's a farmer's market. Yale students are everywhere in that slightly rumpled way that Yale students have always been. 2 miles from here in the neighborhood where you just bought your house for $1, a coffee shop opened last year. A brewery opened the year before. Your neighbors, a mix of longtime residents and newcomers like you, are slowly, carefully, genuinely building something. And you own a house in Connecticut, 45 minutes from the most expensive housing market in the world for $1. This is not theoretical, this has happened. This is happening, and the window, like all windows in real estate, will not stay open forever. So let's bring this all together. Because if you've watched this far, you're either seriously considering one of these programs, or you're just deeply fascinated by the strange and broken beauty of American cities in decline. Either one is valid. Here's what you actually need to know to pursue any of these programs. First, land banks are the mechanism. Almost every city doing this operates through a county or city land bank, a quasi-governmental entity specifically designed to manage vacant and abandoned properties. The National Land Bank Network tracks land banks across the country, and there are now over 250 of them operating in the United States. Many of them have $1 or low-cost programs. Second, the requirements are real. Every single one of these programs requires something in return. Usually it's a renovation commitment with a timeline. Sometimes it's owner-occupancy, meaning you actually have to live there. Sometimes it's income verification. Sometimes it's a development plan you have to submit before purchase. You don't just hand over $1 and get a key. There is paperwork, there is process, but it's not impossible. Third, renovation costs are the actual investment. The dollar is essentially symbolic. The real number you need to budget is renovation. In most of these cities, that means anywhere from $30,000 on the absolute low end for a property that needs mostly cosmetic work, to $150,000 or more for a full gut renovation of a seriously deteriorated structure. Some land banks offer renovation loans or connect buyers to community development financial institutions that specialize in exactly this situation. Fourth, the equity potential is genuinely real. This is the part that real estate investors have understood for years while everyone else wasn't paying attention. Buying into a transitional neighborhood in a city with underlying economic strengths, a university, a port, proximity to a major metro, an emerging industry at land bank prices creates the kind of entry point that simply does not exist in normal markets. People who bought in Corktown in Detroit 10 years ago for $15,000 are sitting on properties worth $200,000 today. Fifth, and I will say this clearly because it matters, these programs predominantly exist in communities that have experienced decades of disinvestment, systemic neglect, and real hardship. The people who stayed, who raised families in these neighborhoods through the hard years are still there. Going in with respect for that history, with commitment to the community and not just the investment, is not just ethically the right approach, it's also practically the one that works. The most successful land bank buyers across all of these cities consistently describe the same thing. They didn't just buy a house, they joined a neighborhood. That distinction matters enormously. Here's the bottom lines. The American dream, homeownership, equity, stability, a place that is yours has become, for a huge percentage of Americans, something that feels completely out of reach. Housing prices have disconnected from incomes in ways that are genuinely historic. A generation of people who did everything right is still renting because the math simply doesn't work in the places where the jobs are. And quietly, in cities that the rest of America has decided to ignore, there are programs running right now that offer a legitimate, legal, completely real alternative path. It is not easy, it is not for everyone. The trade-offs are real and you should take them seriously. But somewhere in America tonight, someone is signing paperwork on a house they bought for $1. They're going to spend the next year and a half renovating it, dealing with permits and contractors and moments where everything looks worse before it looks better. And then one day they're going to be standing on a porch they own outright, in a neighborhood that needs them as much as they needed it, watching the sun go down over a city that the rest of America gave up on. And they're going to know something most people don't. That the deal of a lifetime is usually hiding in the place nobody thought to look. If you found this useful, share it with someone who's been priced out of their local market. Because there's a very good chance they've never heard of any of this, and that information might change something for them. And if you want to see more videos about where America is moving, where it's leaving, and where the real opportunities are hiding in plain sight, you know what to do. See you in the next one.